Coming up on this Friday edition of Newsline at noon, President Park Geunhye convenes a meeting of security-related ministers to discuss steps to cope with future provocations after North Korea fired several artillery rounds into South Korean waters. The nomination of Supreme Court Justice Ahn Dae-hee is expected to give a shot in the arm to the Park administration's drive to combat corruption and rebuild basic principles in the nation. Plus, global leaders condemn the military coup in Thailand, calling for the restoration of a civilian government. These stories and more on Newsline at noon.
It's noon Friday, May 23rd here in Korea. Thanks for tuning in. Live from Seoul, I'm Oh Jin-ju.
Very good to have you with us. I'm Mark Broom. Our top story this afternoon, President Park Geunhye has been locked in a meeting with her security-related ministers on this Friday, following North Korea's shelling across the western de facto maritime border on Thursday.
Expressing deep regret over Pyongyang's latest provocation as South Korea still mourns the loss of hundreds of lives in the Seoul ferry disaster, President Park called for the military and related agencies to be prepared for anything.
She urged officials to do all that they can to protect the lives and safety of South Koreans near the disputed waters and throughout the country. President Park also talked about bolstering Seoul's defense readiness with ally Washington and cooperating with neighboring countries like China on handling North Korea-related issues. The meeting comes a day after the president accepted the resignations of her top security advisor and intelligence agency chief following her pledge for sweeping government reforms.
North Korea continues its diplomatic activities with the outside world, meeting this week with senior figures from the U.S. and Mongolia and Japanese officials next week. It indicates Pyongyang is open for talks, but another provocation aimed at the South is sending mixed signals. Our Yoo Li-an reports.
Senior figures from North Korea and the United States have been holding talks this week for the first time since the purge and execution of Pyongyang's second most powerful figure, Jang Song-thaek, late last year. A delegation of North Korean officials headed by Vice Foreign Minister Ri Yong-ho was scheduled to hold a meeting with Stephen Bosworth, the former U.S. Special Representative for North Korea policy, along with other North Korean experts in Mongolia on Friday. The meeting is part of a series of so-called 1.5-track meetings that began last September when the two groups met for the first time in Berlin.
With North Korean nuclear problems still unresolved, it's significant that the countries are holding talks through the 1.5-track meetings, where the two can narrow down their differences.
North Korea also has talks with Japan slated for this coming Monday, where diplomats from the two countries will discuss Pyongyang's past abductions of Japanese citizens and its nuclear program. But despite the diplomatic activity, North Korea continues its provocative actions. It fired artillery in the direction of a South Korean warship near the de facto maritime border, separating the two Koreas on Thursday.
So overall, they're trying to mix up with the diplomatic maneuvers, with the provocative actions within Korean Peninsula. The thing is, we international community have not seen the North Korean behavior that offers a pathway to negotiating settlement. So I'm not that positive, but still it's an open area.
At this rate, North Korea is unlikely to find a breakthrough in its efforts to engage itself with the outside world anytime soon. Yoo Li-an, Arirang News.
Washington's plan to slap more sanctions on North Korea to rein in its appetite for provocations and threats is threatening to further damage U.S.-China relations. The envisioned measures, which could actively target Chinese companies in the North, come at a time when Washington and Beijing are already at odds over another sensitive issue. Our Kim Hyun-bin tells us more.
The already tense relations between the U.S. and China could be exacerbated in the coming weeks and months by North Korean issues. The New York Times reported this week that Washington is weighing up whether to impose further sanctions on Pyongyang that target Chinese enterprises in the North. This option came to the fore last month when U.S. President Barack Obama held summit talks with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe in Tokyo. The two leaders specifically discussed more targeted sanctions on the North Korean regime that could cut off the flow of Chinese money into the country. North Korea is almost completely dependent on China, its only remaining ally for trade. China accounted for nearly 90% of North Korean trade last year. On a slightly different topic, the New York Times article also said President Obama was not involved in the Justice Department's decision to indict 5 Chinese military officers for hacking. It added, however, that the move was consistent with Obama's belief that Washington needs to get tough on China on this issue. The U.S. accuses Chinese President Xi Jinping of ignoring repeated demands for his government to stop hacking into American firms and stealing trade secrets. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
Japan has once again been called out for ignoring its past wrongdoings, this time by a member of the U.S. House of Representatives. Loretta Sanchez didn't just aim her latest comments at Tokyo, but she also called on her colleagues in the Senate to take action and make sure the former comfort woman received justice. Connie Kim has the story.
A U.S. Congresswoman in the Armed Services Committee has called on Japan to officially apologize for its sexual enslavement of women during World War II. Loretta Sanchez, co-chair of the Congressional Caucus on Korea, said in a meeting that less than 100 of the 200,000 so-called comfort women are alive today and that their human rights need to be upheld. Urging her fellow congressmen to support the surviving comfort women, Sanchez called on the Japanese government to uphold a U.S. resolution passed in 2007 that calls on Tokyo to formally acknowledge, apologize, and accept its historical responsibility for enslaving women during World War II and educate future generations of the horrific crimes that were carried out. Sanchez said earlier this month in a military plenary session that Japan's comfort woman issue cannot be dealt separately in the Obama administration's Asia rebalancing strategy. She warned that Japan needed to resolve its long-standing disputes in the region first. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Stay up to date on the latest news out of Korea. Connecting to our team of reporters about the issues that matter to Korea. On air, on your mobile, online. Find out more about Korea on NEWSLINE at Noon with Mark Broom and Jin-ju.
I'm Jin-ju.
Market researcher, strategy analytics, said Thursday that LG Electronics brought in about... Now, to the latest on the investigation into the Sewol-ho ferry disaster. The authorities now consider the de facto owner of the ferry, Yoo Li-an, a fugitive after he failed to show up for questioning multiple times. Investigators believe Yoo, who is also a leader of a religious cult, to be hiding out in a devotee's home. Prosecutors say a number of houses and apartments are now under 24-hour surveillance. They are warning that anyone found helping the ferry owner will also be punished for harbouring a key suspect in the case. This comes a day after prosecutors were granted a warrant to detain Yoo. Prosecutors have also offered a cash reward of 50 million won. That's about $48,000 to anyone with information on his whereabouts. A cash reward has also been offered for information on his eldest son, Yoo Dae-gyun, who is on the nation's most wanted list. Now, Korean voters head to the polls in less than 2 weeks' time for the June 4th local elections, where the public is widely expected to send a message to the ruling party over its poor handling of the Sewol-ho ferry disaster. But President Park's apology and a shake-up of her top advisors may have given the ruling party a boost. Our Park Geunhye reports.
The failed handling of the Sewol-ho ferry disaster has hit the incumbent administration hard. Since the accident in mid-April, President Park Geunhye's approval rating had been on a steady decline, dropping to 51% in the second week of May, according to public opinion research firm Realmeter. But the president's apology to the nation this week may have turned the tide. Media research has Park's approval rating rebounding to the 60% range for the first time since the ferry disaster, up to 62%. Research View says a positive evaluation of President Park's public address on Monday pushed up her positive ratings by 4 percentage points this week compared to the previous one. Both polls surveyed some 1,000 people nationwide over the age of 19 and had a margin of error of 3.1 percentage points. Political analysts say her appointing of reform-minded former Supreme Court Justice An Dae-hee as new prime minister and accepting the resignations of her top security advisors could also play a role in gathering conservative support at the elections.
Due to prevailing negative views about the ruling party following its poor handling of the disaster, conservative-inclined voters weren't able to outwardly express their support for the ruling party. The president's call for changes means the ability to support conservative candidates has been restored to some degree.
However, in a survey conducted by Research and Research, 40% of respondents said the ferry disaster affected their voting decisions, and nearly 60% of them said their support has shifted to opposition parties. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
Now, as Ji-won mentioned, the president's nomination of An Dae-hee as the new prime minister could have done the Conservative Party a huge favor. And the biggest question is, would An be successful in helping President Park fulfill her pledge of cleaning up government in the wake of the tragic Seodo ferry sinking? Arirang News' Kim Min-ji got on experts' thoughts on the matter.
Experts believe the nomination of the former Supreme Court Judge An Dae-hee as the nation's next prime minister represents the Park Geunhye administration's push for government reforms.
The nomination can be interpreted as the president's strong will towards political and governmental reform in the midst of high public demand for reforms in the area of government bureaucrats and government organization.
Yoon said the nominee's upstanding career may have been one of the factors behind his nomination.
An was a prosecutor before becoming a Supreme Court judge, and he has led an upright career with an image of integrity and reform-mindedness.
He added the nomination also signals a much-anticipated shakeup in President Park's cabinet.
Given An's nomination and the government's will for reforms, it seems highly likely that President Park will choose non-bureaucratic politicians and experts outside governmental organizations as heads of ministries.
Yoon's predictions about the upcoming cabinet reshuffle comes as public doubt grows high concerning governmental organizations and bureaucrats over their failed handling of the ferry disaster. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Now, following last month's Seodo ferry disaster, more Coast Guard officers are deciding to step down from their posts. The Coast Guard says 26 officers signed up for voluntary resignation during the first 2 weeks of the registration period this month. That doubles the number compared to the same period last year. Observers say the officers' decisions are probably driven out of concern about the future of the Coast Guard. The agency was at the center of public outrage for its handling of the ferry sinking, and in an address this week, President Park vowed to disband the agency.
The global e-commerce website eBay sent a chill down the spine of millions of its users this week when it revealed that their personal information may have been compromised. Koreans know this feeling well. Unfortunately, earlier this year, the largest data leak in the nation's history ultimately led to 3 major credit card companies being banned from key business activities. These bans have expired now, and the firms in question say they've fixed the problems that led to the leaks in the first place. But have they really? Shin Se-min reports.
A security breach that affected some 20 million bank and credit card users earlier this year had a domino effect in the sector. The CEOs of the card companies responsible stepped down, and the nation's financial watchdog slapped a 90-day business suspension on KB Kookmin Card, Lotte Card, and NH-농협 Card. 3 months later, the companies say they have revamped their security systems. The business suspensions on all 3 credit card companies were lifted on May 17th. But in less than a week, the companies have been slapped with additional lawsuits seeking compensation. The looming lawsuits are on top of the combined 3 million customers and $155 million the companies lost during the suspensions. In an effort to win clients back, Lotte Card, NH-농협 Card, and KB Kookmin Card are touting a number of new measures that include security education programs for employees, transitioning to a cloud system to allow for better monitoring, and setting up a security task forces. But it may not be enough.
At this point, with the lenient government sanctions, I believe additional personal data leaks are highly possible.
I personally am offended, thinking that my personal information is easily exposed and might have already been used by hackers. I'm not pleased at all.
According to industry experts, there's still good reason for customers to be concerned.
If an American or a Japanese company fails to protect their clients' personal data, their courts will go as far as to bankrupt the company. In Korea, the penalty for massive data leaks is insufficient. If these firms were able to fix all their problems within just 3 months, this year's security breach wouldn't have occurred in the first place.
Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Now, the government and the nuclear energy industry are taking preemptive steps to prevent power shortages during the hot and sticky summer season. The Energy Ministry says the nation's nuclear power plants have been undergoing a special inspection this month. The inspection, which will run through the end of June, is in light of last year's energy crisis and is separate from regular checkups. Last summer, several nuclear reactors went offline either due to regular inspections or because they were found to have used parts with forged safety certificates. The government had to ask the public to voluntarily slash their energy usage when the nation was hit by a prolonged heat wave. Korea has a total of 23 nuclear reactors, and they provide around 1/3 of the nation's total energy supply. Now, Korea is generally regarded as an IT powerhouse around the world, but the OECD says the country needs to work on better channeling its research and development to create real corporate results. Our Kim Ji-yeon reports.
The K-Tech Global R&D Forum, supervised by the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy, was a chance to examine the current state of Korea's industrial technology and R&D policies from a global perspective. A senior economist from the OECD, Alistair Nolan, released the agency's latest report on the matter. He says Korea has one of the highest levels of university patenting for technology, following Israel and Estonia. But Nolan said the patents are not frequently used by corporations, highlighting a lack of interaction between the business and academic fields.
Time and again, when we talked with industry representatives, the lack of awareness of IP, intellectual property, was considered a problem. They have a mindset which is conditioned, which is shaped by the incentives that they face, because they are rewarded and their universities are rewarded according to the rate of academic citations and patents, but they're not rewarded in terms of or because of their success in commercialization outcomes.
A handful of model policies from the world's leading academic institutions were presented in response. Electrical engineering professor Kim Jong-min of Oxford University says his institution seeks to own all of its intellectual property jointly with its owners so that it can be used by researchers and industry partners.
Some people say they may lose opportunity and money in the short period of time, but in the longer term, they will get more returns as a royalty.
Kim suggested that small and medium-sized companies have a great chance to succeed in the energy sector when collaborating with universities, since it depends on the basic sciences and the convergence of many different types of R&D. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Time now for a look through the international headlines. For that, we connect to our Eunice Kim standing by at the news center.
Eunice, Thailand's military has announced a coup d'etat just 2 days after insisting one wasn't underway.
That's right, Mark, and global leaders have been quick to condemn the move, which has everyone wondering what might be next. Our Kwon-soa reports.
The promise just lasted 2 days. After a sudden declaration of martial law on Tuesday, Thailand's military announced a coup d'etat Thursday with an aim of ending the ongoing political turmoil in the country. World leaders were quick to condemn the move. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry said there was no justification for the coup and warned of negative implications for the U.S.-Thai relationship, particularly military-related ones. The European Union and neighboring Asian countries spoke out as well. United Nations Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon voiced deep concerns over the threat to the human rights of the Thai people.
The Secretary-General is seriously concerned by the military takeover in Thailand today. He appeals for a prompt return to constitutional, civilian, democratic rule and an all-inclusive dialogue that will pave the way for long-term peace and prosperity in Thailand.
There have been no signs of unrest on the streets of Thailand so far since the launch of the coup. The coup includes a nationwide curfew of 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. and soldiers dispersed demonstrators at two main protest sites. Government programming filled the airwaves and international news channels were blocked. The Korean embassy in Thailand asked for Korean residents and travelers to follow the army's rules to avoid demonstration areas and try to refrain from outdoor activities. They've also requested that citizens not post comments on the current situation on social networking sites. The coup comes after 6 months of political turmoil in the nation as anti-government protesters seek a people's council to rule the country. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
Dozens of people were killed in a market explosion in China's restive far western region, marking the deadliest attack Xinjiang has seen in recent years. Xinhua news agency reports at least 31 are dead and nearly 100 injured after two SUVs without license plates rammed through barriers and into shoppers, setting off explosives. The assault happened in an Urumqi market at 7:50 Thursday morning. Chinese authorities blamed radical Muslim separatists from the Uyghur minority. Chinese President Xi Jinping pledged to, quote, severely punish the terrorists responsible for the attack. And as Serbians observe 3 days of national mourning this week, police said 27 people were killed and more than 580 missing following the region's worst rainfall in memory. Serbia's prime minister said damages could reach upwards of $2 billion. Meanwhile, in neighboring Bosnia, the deadly flooding affected 40% of the country, wrecking the main agricultural industry and wiping out infrastructure. 22 people there were reported killed. Both countries have begun talks with the European Union for reconstruction aid in the coming days. And over in the U.S., New York City police, together with federal authorities, have arrested at least 70 people in one of the country's most sweeping online child pornography busts ever. The arrests conclude a 5-week-long investigation that identified a peer-to-peer network which allowed online users to share illicit images of children. Among those arrested were trusted members of society, a police chief, a rabbi, and a Boy Scout leader, just to name a few. Most were men charged with exploiting and photographing children. One woman was also detained for allegedly using Skype to place her child in compromising positions. They face jail terms of 7 to 25 years if convicted.
Good afternoon. Well, it will be hotter than yesterday here in Seoul, rising all the way up to a scorching 29 degrees Celsius. And temperatures across the region will be in the upper 20s or low 30s. And due to a lot of sunshine, the UV level will be relatively higher than normal. So make sure you have your sun protection accessories ready before heading out today. And it seems like the skies should remain bright tomorrow with high temperatures. But Sunday, we're expecting showers in the capital, which could linger till Monday morning, and that band of showers should cool things down. Well, sunny skies are also expected over in Jindo at the site of the ferry accident, where winds and waves should remain calm, and the currents in the water will begin to slow it down since the nip tide period starts today. With that in mind, let's take a closer look at the readings for today. The high in Seoul will rise to 29, while Daegu and Gwangju will peak at 30, and Busan should climb to 23 later on under lots of sunshine. Well, let's see how other regions are looking. It looks like down on Jeju and Daejeon will reach 25 and 29, and Dokdo should see a high of 20, while Mount Kumgang tops out at 19. Well, that's all for me this week, but I'll be back with more updates on Monday morning.
Well, thank you, Jian. And those other stories we're following at this hour.
Jinju and I will be back at the same time on Monday. Thank you for watching.